As Jim Nantz famously said, Duke is the king of the dance, 2010. Let's go back down memory lane.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome on into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. So good to have you here with us today on the program. We're at Locked On Blue Devils. We talk about Duke athletics each and every day, your number one spot to go and do that. Thank you for your support, as always, of our program. We've got a good one for you today, as on today's show, we're going to go back down memory lane. We're going to look at the 2010 National Championship team for Duke basketball, how they got the job done, and are there any similarities between this current Duke team and that 2010 one beyond the obvious in John Scheyer? All of that coming up throughout the course of today's show. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free wherever it is that you get your podcast. Be sure to leave us a 5-star rating and written review on the Apple Podcast platform. And then you can watch the show each and every day as well. A hello to our YouTube audience. Thank you for being a part of our community each and every day. Like this video, share it with your friends, and most importantly, subscribe to our YouTube channel as we continue that climb towards 3,000 subscribers. So excited to celebrate that milestone with you when we get there. All right, on today's show, Brian Horace at Duke Blogger is back with us once again, one of our favorites as we bring him on into the program in the new year. Happy holidays, happy new year to everyone once again within the Locked On Blue Devils world. And Brian, we've got an easy task today, my friend. We get to go and celebrate a national championship squad for Duke.
Yes. The good old days. Very nice.
The good old days indeed, man. We love going back down memory lane. We love going back to 2010 and kind of talking about the team. We'll get to some similarities in just a little bit, but just kind of opening thoughts. When you think about that 2010 squad, when you think about Mike Krzyzewski's fourth title as the head coach in Durham, what is it that comes to mind for you?
For me, it was just how that particular team grew over the course of their time at Duke, from losing early on, a couple of years in a row to finally getting to the top of the mountain and, having those experiences, I think really helped them in that season to sort of, to know what it took to get to the, to the top of the mountain. I think it was just their, they all stuck together and, after, losing, I think early in the first or second round as a 2, I think, and then, being able to get there, and not have a really easy road, but like, Scheyer, Singler, Smith, they all sort of stayed the course, Zubek as well, and they got there.
What a team it was. So fun to watch throughout the course of the season. When I think back, this is a championship that is so special to me in so many ways in 2010, notably the fact that, here I am approaching 30 years on planet Earth, coming into the world in 1995. You've got the 01 title team, but as a 6-year-old, not really cognizant and aware of everything that's taking place in Duke basketball. Fast forward 9 years later, I'm obsessed with everything that takes place in the sport itself. And to see Duke ultimately win that national championship was so special and something that I'm going to remember for many, many years to come, for sure. Getting to celebrate that, yes, this is it. We are finally champions. We are finally over the top. And it goes hand in hand with that senior class like you're talking about. They lost in the first round of the NCAA tournament as freshmen. They went to the round of 32 as sophomores. They went to the Sweet 16 as juniors. Fortunately, it didn't stop in the Elite Eight versus Baylor, Brian. Fortunately, they still had more basketball to play.
Yeah, Baylor's always tough, and to get past that was from what I remember, that was a real strong team. Yeah, really, really physical. But Duke was able to honestly out physical them and get past them in that game.
Yeah, so to set up the season, again, a team that had each year kind of been climbing towards something like this, and we talk about the senior class and the impact that they left on Duke basketball. If we set expectations and what to expect for a Duke team that's coming off a Sweet 16 loss the year prior, they're also losing one of their best players because Gerald Henderson decided after 3 seasons, I'm going to go ahead and go to the NBA, and becomes a top 10 pick in the NBA draft. Hard to fault him in making such decision there. But that's a big focal point of what you're wanting your team to be when he made that decision to go off to the league, and had to temper some people's thoughts into what Duke could do the following year.
Without a doubt. I mean, he was probably the most athletic guy on that squad. And, they did not really have a replacement for that particular role on the team. I mean, there was no, high flyers, that really were on the team that he, after he left. So it was definitely one of those things where you definitely, sort of dampened your expectations, tempered your enthusiasm of what this Duke team was going to be. But in the end, yeah, it was fine.
Yeah, it totally was fine. Once we get to the conclusion there with the Duke team ultimately cutting down the nets, you look at the obviously key players for this squad set up by John Scheyer, Nolan Smith, and Kyle Singler, expected to carry a heavy dose of the load. Nowadays, we're in a one-and-done era, and it's coming. It's coming after this 2010 season that Duke's really going to start to recruit like crazy and bring on a top high level of talent. But it's a 2010 season where you're looking at this freshman class and you see Mason Plumlee and you're like, all right, we just had the first year of Miles Plumlee on the team. Let's go. We got another Plumlee brother. Ryan Kelly, what can this guy do? How is his body going to hold up in the college game? We know he can shoot it from the outside. Is there any post presence at all? And then in a time where it was really uncommon, Andre Dawkins says, I don't want to do this senior year of high school stuff. Let me go ahead and get to school right away. And he's able to come a year earlier than advertised, joining the Duke basketball team. So much different than some of these 6- and 7-man recruiting classes that we've had. When we go into the year, we're only hearing of 3 freshmen for this Duke team.
Yeah, it's definitely, times have changed, and even the freshmen that they brought in weren't going to be necessarily super impact freshmen. They were going to be guys that they're able to bring along over the course of a few years. So definitely a completely different college basketball landscape at that point, for sure.
Also different in the fact that this offseason, Gerald Henderson leaves. Walking in now is Seth Curry, who makes the decision to transfer over from Liberty. Unlike today's college basketball game, he can't play right away, Brian. He was a part of the team. He practiced every single game, but because he was an NCAA transfer, he had to sit out from competition that year, right?
Yep, for sure, man. But I do think he was a huge part of what that team did defensively. I think having someone like Curry, on the scout teams and being able to practice really helped them out with the amount of, defensive pressure they were able to put on teams. And I think that definitely helped. I mean, they would give up 61 points a game that particular season. I think that those scout teams for the Duke championship teams were, bar none, some of the best that I think they've had.
No doubt. A senior class for Duke led by John Scheyer, Lance Thomas, and Brian Zubek ultimately win the national championship. How did they get it done? Let's kind of run through that NCAA tournament and other key moments from the season, and we'll do that after we take our first break here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place. Whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year, Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. One of the best features for me is the subscription tracker. I was able to use it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. Plus, with the goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every single month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Rocket Money is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Duke is the king of the dance. 2010, they win the tournament title over Butler. But before they get there, they've got to work their way through a tough non-conference schedule, as is the course with Duke basketball over the years. An ACC regular season, an ACC tournament, and then you finally get into the NCAA tournament. When we look at the season as a whole, before the big dance even gets started, it's a Duke team, Brian, that was co-champions in the regular season. And then, oh yeah, they went to the ACC tournament and found a way to win that one too.
Yeah, that was a sight to behold. I think that was against who they play in that one?
I'm going back down memory lane myself. Georgia Tech was the title game.
Georgia Tech, and I think they lost to Georgia Tech earlier in the season.
Yep.
Yeah, so yeah, that was it was a heck of a game. It was a 4-point game, I believe.
65-61. John Scheyer made a big three down the stretch to kind of put that one away, and Duke won the ACC tournament.
That's when you sort of knew this might be a team of destiny here. There's something cooking, you know.
Yes. Undoubtedly. Kyle Singler led the way for Duke in those games, 18 points, 27, and then 20 in the title game. A Duke team down the stretch that was trying to always figure out, okay, who's the primary ball handler, who's the point guard, who's getting us into sets. And it didn't really matter if it was Scheyer bringing the ball up the floor or Nolan Smith in those opportunities. Duke found a ton of success with letting Nolan Smith just kind of play off the ball and going to get a bucket when he needed. But Scheyer wasn't afraid to look for a shot either.
No, it's crazy enough. Like the amount of guys on that team that could make open shots. I mean, they had Scheyer shot 38% from three. Nolan was Singler was 39, almost 40% from three. Nolan was 39% from three. Dawkins was 38% from three. I mean, that's a lot of guys. I mean, they didn't take a whole bunch of shots from three back then, but that's still a lot of firepower, you know, from beyond the arc on one team.
So then we get into the NCAA tournament for this Duke basketball team, and they're seated in Jacksonville to take on Arkansas Pine Bluff in California in the first two rounds of the NCAA tournament as a 1 seed within the tournament. I had the opportunity to be at these games with my dad and with some Duke basketball folks there. Really enjoyed getting to watch them knock off these first two opponents in the big dance. And again, you finally get to tournament time, and this team's got to be thinking, we've already lost in the first round once in our career, already made it to, you know, the second and Sweet 16 rounds. How can we get this going even further? It starts with taking care of business in those first few rounds, and there weren't any scares, which is nice to see, man, because we know March Madness, and you are prone to some scares from time to time.
Yeah, I thought, you know, in that Purdue game that, you know, they might give them a run, but no, it wasn't even close in those first three matchups. I mean,
yeah, even further. Yeah, to your point, they play Purdue in the Sweet 16 matchup. They win 70-57. The Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight games were played in Houston, an Elite Eight game against Baylor. That was a classic with so many signature moments from that game. I'm thinking of a crazy Lance Thomas kind of put back and Nolan Smith hitting key bucket down the stretch after key bucket, and ultimately able to get past a very, very talented Baylor team. Like you mentioned, that Baylor team had some dudes, but Duke knew that they would be in some tests and stood tall against that Baylor squad.
Yeah, beating Baylor in Texas is always tough.
No doubt. Epe Ude, Quincy AC, Ladarius Dunn, those were some of the names once again on that Baylor squad.
AC was a baller.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And that was a tough kind of opposition for Duke to have to be going up against in a game like that. So find a way to win those games, and then you head off to the Final Four, Duke's first Final Four in a little while. First time that this Duke senior class certainly was able to kind of get over that hump, and they're heading down to play in the Final Four this season, and they're taking on a West Virginia team that was a 6 seed out of Indianapolis. That's the other thing kind of going for Duke when you're watching this tournament unfold is, hey, some things are kind of falling in your favor with these matchups, but don't get it twisted. West Virginia had beaten Duke just 2 seasons prior in the round of 32. A lot of still similar players on that West Virginia team that were going up against this Duke one in the Final Four.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, Bob Huggins knows how to coach. I mean, regardless of what you think of the man, he puts together, tough physical, especially on the guard side of things. He puts together tough, physical lineups, and you had to know this was going to be a hard game for Duke to go in there and win.
Yeah. In this one, though, very early in the game, to kind of remind, Deshaun Butler was a star player for West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
He was injured very early in this game. There's the scene of Bob Huggins going out on the floor and checking on his player, and that's kind of a still shot where maybe West Virginia started to sense, okay, we've kind of run out of gas in this March Madness run.
It's crazy that Joe Mazzulla was on that team as well.
Yeah.
He was one of their starting guards. So.
Right. And now the Boston Celtics head coach. You see Duke pick up the win in this one, winning by 21 over West Virginia. And then, Brian, we have a title game matchup for Duke as they get set to take on Butler in the national championship game. Talk about unexpected things, man. Who is Butler? That's what a lot of people in the basketball world were asking themselves then.
Yeah, it's a different landscape now. Everyone knows Butler, and I think it began with them getting to this finals game and making a name for their program they definitely wasn't a team I expected to get there, and I'm sure a lot of people were like, well, this is going to be a cakewalk for the Blue Devils, and obviously it was not. And Butler was a very well coached team. Very, very well coached.
Yeah, Brad Stevens, the head coach for Butler in that game, and
what he's done since then is history. But that guy really had his guys prepared, and definitely not a pushover game. It was a well played game.
So as we go down memory lane, we're talking about the 2010 title game, and Duke's got this chance to be national champions. And in so many ways, they're hyping the game up as David versus Goliath, rightfully so. You've got Duke and Mike Krzyzewski, one of the powers within the sport. You've got the Butler Bulldogs. Who are they? Who in the world are these guys? And Duke wins it 61-59. The last shot is something that's going to ring true, and people are going to think about forever and ever and ever when you think about those iconic moments in March Madness history. But even before that, Brian, what do you remember from the game before we even get to the final spots? What do you remember?
I just remember it being a very, very well executed game plan by both teams. I mean, it was, no team could really get a working margin. It was always back and forth, and like the execution from both sides really showed you how both coaches, really had a handle on their lineups and what they could and couldn't do and what they did well. And it was just like high level play after high level play after high level play. It was a fun game to watch if you weren't a fan of either team. Super stressful if you were a fan of either team. But all in all, it was just a very well played game.
At halftime, it was just a 1-point game. Duke had just a 33-32 lead at the break. When you look at this game unfolding, the largest separation that either team really had in this one was 5 points, just a 5-point difference in that final score and throughout the course of the game. So to your point, just kind of a classic, both teams going back and forth, neither team finding ways to create separation. But again, for Duke, their seniors, John Scheyer specifically, and then a pair of juniors and Nolan Smith and Kyle Singler kind of helping put Duke over the edge offensively before we even get into those final couple of minutes.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. I think, and that was the key, having that, that very experienced backcourt that wasn't going to get rattled, that was, they've been in these high pressure situations and they've come, out on the wrong end of it. But I think those were the building blocks that really created this opportunity for, both Nolan Smith and John Scheyer, and they came through.
If you like offensive basketball and you just look at these shooting percentages for this game in particular, Brian, Duke 44% from the floor, Butler 34%, Butler 33% from three-point range, Duke just 29%. Duke shot 62% from the free throw line. Butler shot 72% from the free throw line. The defenses were standing strong in this game. And that goes to show that, again, the largest lead for either team in this one was 5.
Oh, without a doubt. It was, and Duke had been good defensively all year, as had Butler. And you knew it wasn't going to be a super high scoring game necessarily, but you knew it was going to be a game that came down to who can make those winning plays and who could keep the other guys off the boards. And in the end, it ended up being, Duke had just a little bit more, just a little bit more.
Yeah.
Be it luck or skill, it was probably more luck.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And Nolan Smith made a pair of free throws down the stretch for Duke to give them a 60-55 lead. And then over the next minute 50, Matt Howard is able to score 4 points. The big fella on the interior for Butler to cut it to a 1-point game. Duke misses on the other end of the floor. Gordon Hayward grabs the rebound, drives baseline, and kind of a fall-away baseline jumper that I still think is a shot that he would love to have back even before we get to the half-court heave. Nearly makes it, but it's a Brian Zubek rebound, and he's fouled. I mean, that spot alone within the game where Butler and Hayward missed that kind of fall-away jumper was so key.
Oh, yeah. I still remember being at my house standing up because I couldn't sit down. I could not sit down.
I was standing up at the house too. Yeah.
I remember pacing and not wanting to not really wanting to look, but having to look.
Yes. So Brian Zubek goes to the free throw line. He makes the first. Coach K famously tells him to miss the second free throw. What a gamble. What a gamble from the Hall of Famer with 3 seconds remaining. He does miss it. And then we've got Gordon Hayward with the heave that almost went in.
Yeah, that's the shot that Duke fans still watch to this day. And still, even though we know how it goes, we're still glued to our seats watching it like, please miss.
Yeah, it looks so good. Looks like he's got an opportunity to make it.
It might be one of the most famous misses in NCAA basketball history, honestly.
I think you're onto something. Yeah, I don't know what else would be up there in that conversation because what an iconic miss it was. Thankfully, he did miss. Duke wins it all. Locked On Blue Devils, we've got a memory lane conversation here today with Duke being the 2010 national champions. Fun to kind of go back and revisit that season with Brian Horace at Duke Blogger on X. I'm JJ Jackson. So to kind of wrap up our thoughts and conversation here today, Brian, I'm so curious, what similarities would one find if they were to look at that 2010 team and this current Duke team?
Yeah, one of the things I think that is similar is the size of the team. I mean, aside from Nolan Smith, who is 6'2", everybody on that team who was a scholarship player was 6'5" or above.
So good to point out. Yeah.
It was, I think that may have been where Scheyer started to think about, along, down the line, hey, that team that we had was a bigger team. It really helped us on the defensive end. Even when we weren't playing our best defense, we at very least had a size advantage. We can reach and deflect and things like that. I also think having guys this season like Proctor, who have been through, those early losses, and in his career, they lost in the Tennessee manhandle Duke in Scheyer's first season, and then again, they get a little further last season into the Elite Eight, and they lose to NC State, a team which, on paper, they probably should have beaten.
Yep.
So I think having those guys, like Proctor, even to a certain extent, you have Gillis, who got to the championship last year, I believe, with Purdue.
Yep.
And guys that have had those tough losses and sort of, they're not going to get rattled. They know what it takes to get past those games now. So I think having the experience to go along with those those freshmen, I think is going to be something that this team has that the last the 2010 team had. They had guys that had worked their way from early losses and hopefully built on that to get to where they were. And hopefully you want that same from Proctor, from Gillis, guys that have been in those situations.
I'm glad you mentioned the size, right? Because that is something that is so unique about this year's Duke team being the tallest team in America. And then going back to 2010, to your point, when you look at Nolan Smith at 6'2", he's the only guy really that is playing and making an impact under 6'5". When you look at 6'5", John Scheyer, you've got Kyle Singler and Lance Thomas at 6'8". You've got the 7-footer and Brian Zubek, the Plumlee brothers and Miles and Mason and Ryan Kelly, all standing at 6'10". Andre Dawkins off the bench as an outside shooter in that 6'4", 6'5" range. So just a really big and physically imposing and intimidating team that teams are having to go up against. Big time similarity from what we're seeing currently from this Duke team with a massive front line and big guards making an impact.
And versatile forwards who can also, who can grab the rebound and go. I mean, Singler was one, he was one of the most versatile players in the NCAA. He's a guy that, you can get a rebound and he can actually run the break for you.
And then we've got John Scheyer, a big similarity between the two teams. Like we said, the obvious one there, but a star player for the Blue Devils as a player in 2010 on this title team, and then now serving as the head coach. And hopefully Duke's able to go this season and claim a national championship, much like they did 15 years ago in 2010. Man, this has been fun going back down memory lane and kind of thinking about the glory days, the good old days, if you will, with that 2010 team. Brian, I appreciate so much you being a part of this journey and conversation with me today. I want people to have an opportunity to follow your work. How can they do that? What are ways to best support you, my friend?
Certainly. You mentioned on X, I'm at Duke Blogger. On Blue Sky, I'm at dukeblogger.com, or just visit dukeblogger.com. We have an article up now on Isaiah Evans and his impact on Duke right now. So pay a visit.
Thank you so much, Brian. We'll do this again soon, okay?
All right.
All right. That's Brian Horace joining us here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Yeah, spoiler alert. Brian and I have to run it back. We need to give you a trip down memory lane once more. What about 2015? How does that title team compare to the current Blue Devils? We'll have that conversation for you very, very soon. That'll do it for today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our podcast feed. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you soon. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.